Rain pelted the windshield as I wound down the endless stretch of highway, my eyes struggling to stay open. The dark clouds overhead mirrored my mood, and every mile I covered felt emptier than the one before. It had been weeks, maybe months, since I'd found a reason to truly smile. My life in the city, once filled with ambitions and bright lights, had crumbled into a handful of regrets and any job that would pay the rent. Somewhere along that unlit road, I caught sight of a dimly lit neon sign, a small cafe that seemed completely out of place in the middle of nowhere. I needed more than a cup of coffee. I needed a reason to hope again. And so I pulled over, not realizing that within those humble walls, I was about to find far more than a hot meal. The exterior was modest, the light a little flickery, but there was an undeniable warmth emanating from inside. Pushing open the creaking door, I was greeted by the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and homemade bread. The interior was small, just a few tables dotted around the room, but it felt as if the place was alive, an oasis of calm in a stormy night. I glanced around and saw a small group of people, each wearing a soft smile. They weren't customers. They moved with authority, carrying trays and wiping down tables. The edges of my coat still dripped with rainwater as one of them, a slender young woman, hurried over with a handful of napkins. "You must be freezing," she said, her voice full of concern. "Here, let me take your coat." She didn't wait for my reply. Her focus was entirely on making sure I felt comfortable. Even before I could react, she'd draped a dry towel around my shoulders. Grateful for the kindness, I sank into a nearby wooden chair, letting the warmth of the cafe slowly thaw my chilled bones. "Welcome," said a voice from behind the counter. A middle-aged woman with gentle eyes and silver-streaked hair stood there, carefully arranging pastries in a glass display. "I'm Meredith, and that's my daughter, Lucy." She nodded toward the young woman who had helped me. "You look like you could use a bite to eat." I nodded as my stomach unleashed a loud growl. Despite the swirling uncertainty in my life, hunger was something too immediate to ignore. Meredith smiled, not unkindly, as if she understood that desperation was as physical a sensation as hunger itself. Without another word, she reached for a bowl from the kitchen window behind her. Within minutes, she placed before me a steaming helping of vegetable stew, the rich broth fragrant with herbs and spices I couldn't quite identify. As I took my first spoonful, I realized this was the first truly hearty meal I'd had in days. My worries didn't vanish with that single bite, but the act of sitting down and feeling the nourishment soothed me from within. Lucy approached again, this time with a cup of coffee. "We brew our own blend," she said proudly. "We also serve second chances." She winked knowingly, but I was too weary to make sense of her words. All I could manage was a shallow nod, followed by another spoonful of comfort. Even in that small cafe, which should have been quiet, there was a subtle hum of activity. A man in his late 50s, tall and lean, was polishing salt and pepper shakers while balancing a conversation with an older patron who seemed equally engrossed in sharing her life story. Sitting close by was a teenage boy with a freckled face, scribbling something in a notebook while occasionally peeking up at me. Everyone here wore so many layers of expression, hope, weariness, gratitude, that it felt like stepping into a place where time slowed, letting people tend to the business of healing. A little bell chimed and the door opened again. This time, a woman in a windbreaker stepped inside, holding a tattered duffel bag. She had the same hungry look I probably had when I first set foot in the cafe. Lucy immediately guided her to a seat across the room, offering her a warm blanket. The new arrival exhaled a long sigh, perhaps relieved to stumble upon kindness, and that was the moment I began to notice. Almost everyone who came in or who worked there seemed to be in the midst of a life transition. Something about this place drew in people who needed a second wind, myself among them. Meredith moved about the small kitchen, occasionally calling instructions to Lucy about certain ingredients or the next batch of muffins. At first, I thought they were just close-knit, but I soon saw the tender looks they exchanged. They weren't simply coworkers, they were family. The tall, lean man with the salt shakers was Meredith's husband, Thomas. He had the gentle, steady presence of a man who had seen his fair share of loss but refused to let it define him. Whenever Meredith or Lucy spoke, he rose to help, a quiet sentinel of the place. After finishing my stew and coffee, a fuzzy warmth spread through me. I moved from the small table to the counter where Meredith was now rolling out dough. She nodded at me. Need anything else? She offered. And I thanked her for the meal, fumbling for the right words to express my gratitude. It's my pleasure, she said, dusting flour from her hands. None of us are strangers here, no matter where we come from or how broken we might feel. Intrigued by her response, I asked how long they'd been running the cafe. Meredith explained that her grandmother opened it decades ago as a simple roadside stop. Over time, its significance grew. At first, it was just to keep travelers fed during their journeys, Meredith said, her voice warm with memory. But then we noticed that some visitors needed more than a meal. They needed a place to rest, to dream again, to believe that not all roads lead to dead ends. With each word, she kneaded the dough more firmly, as if channeling the resilience needed to keep the cafe thriving. Lucy rejoined us, leaning her elbows on the counter. We started seeing more and more people who were down on their luck, she chimed in. A driver who lost his job, a mother whose daughter was in the hospital, a young man fresh out of rehab. She paused, her eyes misting over slightly. Some stayed longer than others, helping out around the place, getting back on their feet. We gave them food, they gave us hope. We called them second chances. And that's when we started calling ourselves the Second Chance Cafe. My curiosity deepened. So you don't just serve food, you offer them a place to stay and work? I asked, remembering Lucy's earlier comment about serving second chances. Yes, Thomas said from behind. I turned to find him smiling faintly. We all need one sometimes, don't we? Some folks are here for a few nights or weeks, others pass through but leave a piece of their story behind. He gently touched my shoulder, as if to say, You're free to do the same. I couldn't help but look around the modest space with renewed eyes. Everything. The hand-painted signs listing daily specials, the potted plants on the windowsills, the well-worn chairs seemed to hold stories. Even the chipped mugs had probably served countless cups of comfort to tired souls. Quiet chatter filled the room, but it wasn't the aimless banter of strangers. Rather, people exchanged stories, concerns, and smiles, forging connections that felt both authentic and profound. Later that night, after many of the customers left, I helped collect plates around the cafe. Lucy guided me to the back storage area where they kept ingredients, linens, and old family photos. Pictures of Meredith's grandmother festooned the walls, a testament to the courageous woman who started this legacy of kindness. You must have a story, Lucy said, eyeing me with a mixture of curiosity and compassion. Everyone who finds us does. I hesitated, uncertain if I was ready to share, but something about this place gently loosened the knots I'd been carrying in my chest. My words felt unsteady as I began. I was laid off. My dad had a heart attack, and the medical bills piled up. I sank into debt. I tried to hold a second job, but that fell through. My landlord threatened eviction, and I couldn't see a way out. So I just left. Didn't know where I was going, just started driving, hoping I'd find something. My voice broke a little. I guess I found this place. Lucy listened quietly. Her gaze never wavered, and I felt, for the first time in months, that I was being fully heard. I'm sorry for everything you've gone through, she said softly. It's a lot to carry. She continued, stacking linens, giving me time to collect myself. If you want to stay here, at least until you figure out your next step, you can. We have a small bunk room where Thomas sleeps sometimes. It's not fancy, but it'll keep a roof over your head. I felt tears threaten to spill, so I quickly blinked them away. I don't have any money, I admitted, my voice quivering with embarrassment. I can't pay you. You don't have to, Lucy insisted. Just help out around the cafe if you can. That's all we ask, that you put in a little sweat for your supper and share your presence with us. Trust me, we need the help. That night, as the rain continued its relentless drumming outside, I settled into the small bunk room Lucy had shown me. It was warm, cozy, with clean sheets and a comforting smell of lavender. I lay awake for a while, listening to the distant murmur of conversations in the main room. People's voices rose and fell, occasionally punctuated by laughter or quiet sobs as they worked through whatever hardships had brought them there. And I, for the first time in a long time, felt an odd sense of serenity, as if I were exactly where I was meant to be. Morning light filtered through the threadbare curtains, and I hurried out of bed to see how I could help. Peppering Lucy with questions, I learned to prep meals in a cafe kitchen. There was something surprisingly therapeutic about cracking eggs and kneading dough, the repetitive motions focusing my mind away from my anxieties. Thomas took me under his wing, teaching me how to wipe down the tables in swift, economical movements, and how to greet customers in a way that said, "You matter here." At one point, Meredith asked me to take a break and try one of her homemade blueberry muffins. The soft sweetness exploded on my tongue, reminding me of simpler times when my mother would bake for the neighborhood. A piece of my old self fluttered back, bringing a solitary tear of gratitude. Over the next few days, I witnessed people coming into the cafe with looks of defeat, only to leave with something intangible that made their eyes sparkle just a bit more. There was Marcus, a retired truck driver who lost everything in a messy divorce and found himself drifting from state to state. He stayed a few nights, helped repaint one of the walls, and departed with a renewed sense of purpose. There was also Alina, the woman in the windbreaker, who was escaping a dangerous situation at home. She spent long hours folded over a mug of coffee, lost in thought, until Meredith gently coaxed her into helping in the kitchen. Before she left, she managed a frail but genuine smile, whispering that she finally believed life could be different. All these stories began to stitch themselves into the tapestry of my own healing. Each conversation, each sincere gesture of empathy balanced out the months of strain. The cafe wasn't merely a place to fill your stomach, it was where fractured souls came to be mended. Even Lucy, young as she was, had a kind of old soul wisdom about her. She knew exactly when to talk and when to listen. Late one night, as we finished up cleaning, I found the courage to ask her if she'd ever thought of leaving. The question was personal, but it sprang from a place of curiosity about her aspirations. She gave a soft laugh, wiping her brow. "Sometimes I dream of traveling the world," she admitted. "I'd love to see different cultures, learn about how other people live. But then I remember that many come to us with that same wanderlust. Or maybe with no wanderlust at all, they're running away from something. Either way, I believe I'm needed here right now. Might not be forever, but while I'm here, it feels right." We stepped outside for a moment, letting the cool night air wash over us. The stars twinkled overhead in a cloudless sky, a stark contrast to the drenched evening on which I'd arrived. I inhaled the crisp breeze, feeling a sharp pang of gratitude for having stumbled across this pocket of hope. The days fell into a gentle rhythm, preparing breakfast, serving customers, hearing their stories, and climbing into bed each night with a heart that felt a little lighter. Somewhere in the routine, I started to receive calls from old friends, responding to my earlier desperate messages. One offered to pass my resume along for a potential job in my old field. Another told me my father's condition was improving and that he might be stable soon. The news buoyed me, giving me a reason to consider going back. But the thought of leaving the cafe weighed unexpectedly heavy on me. The place had embraced me at my lowest. How could I just walk away? Meredith, sensing my indecision, called me into the kitchen one afternoon while Lucy tended to the front. She was simmering a pot of tomato sauce when she turned to me, stirring slowly. "I can see it on your face," she said. "Part of your heart wants to stay. Part of your mind is telling you it's time to go." She turned down the heat, letting the sauce bubble gently. "I've seen it happen before. People bloom here, and then the world calls them back. There's no shame in leaving if you feel you're ready." "But what if I'm not ready?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if, out there, everything falls apart again?" Meredith gave me a sad, understanding smile. "There are never guarantees, but you're not the same person who walked through that door. You're stronger now, and maybe just a bit wiser. If it helps, know that you can always come back. This place will be here, And if we're not, the spirit of it continues wherever you go. Her words carried the ring of truth that only comes from a life spent caring for others. A reminiscent ache tugged at my heart, and I realized, not for the first time, just how special this cafe was. It gave people the courage to face life again, with a little more faith in themselves. Before dawn the next day, I ventured outside to watch the sun rise. The sky slowly transformed from inky black to soft pink and gold. My breath caught in my throat at the simple beauty of it. Somehow, witnessing the new day fill the horizon made me remember that second chances aren't something you simply take. They are something you embrace with gratitude, shaping them into the fresh beginnings they can become. I felt my pulse quicken as I decided what I needed to do. I had it in my head to leave a note expressing my thanks, but when I re-entered the cafe, I nearly bumped into Tom Yos. He'd been up preparing coffee and sorting the day's deliveries. I realized I had no reason to sneak away. These were my friends now, people I cared about enough to say goodbye in person. The farewell was surprisingly calm. Meredith, seated at a table with her morning cup of tea, nodded when I explained that I was going to see about that job. It could bring some stability, maybe even keep me close enough to help my father. Lucy wrapped me in a hug, while Thomas clapped me encouragingly on the back. "Remember," he said, his tone resolute, "this place will always be your second home." My car was still parked out front, coated in dust. I loaded my meager belongings, just a duffel bag and some stray items I had picked up along the way, and climbed into the driver's seat. Thomas and Lucy stepped outside to see me off. Their silhouettes were haloed by the morning light, and for a moment, it felt like I was leaving family behind. But in another sense, I knew I wasn't leaving them. I was carrying them with me. As the engine rumbled to life, a swell of emotion collided in my chest. I gave them a final wave, and they waved back, smiling. Driven by an unexpected surge of confidence, I pulled onto the highway, the cafe's neon sign growing smaller in my rearview mirror. Its glow lingered in the crisp air like a beacon until it was just another glimmer in my memory. In the weeks that followed, change came swiftly. I secured a job interview at an office that specialized in community outreach. The interviewer took me on, moved by my passion for helping others and my unique perspective on second chances. Soon, I began working with a team that connected individuals to job training, coaching, and brief housing opportunities. At first, it felt like a new language, but as I settled in, I realized that my time at the cafe had equipped me with the empathy and resilience I needed. I could see people as more than their current struggles because I remembered how I'd been seen that way too. Not a day passed without my mind drifting back to the cafe. Sometimes I daydreamed about Lucy handing out warm towels, or Meredith kneading dough, or Thomas quietly offering solace with a simple nod. The memory of that snug bunk room and the daily routine that healed me from the inside out fueled my motivation to help others. And whenever I came across someone who looked lost or weary in life's storms, I silently pictured them finding their own version of the cafe, or at least crossing paths with someone willing to offer them a taste of compassion. Eventually, I heard through the grapevine that the cafe was continuing to flourish. Elena, the woman who'd arrived with just a windbreaker, had returned to volunteer occasionally, delivering messages of hope to battered women's shelters. Marcus, the retired truck driver, brought fresh produce from his small farm whenever he passed through, each vegetable a token of gratitude. Life moved forward, changing each of us in small and monumental ways, yet the cafe and all its stories remained a cornerstone, a place that transformed heartbreak into healing over steaming bowls of stew and humble cups of coffee. Months later, I found myself on a road trip to visit my father in a neighboring state. He'd recovered enough to move into a comfortable apartment where we'd set him up with the care he needed. I guessed my route would take me right past that familiar stretch of highway. Early in the evening, the neon sign glowed faintly at the edge of my vision. I felt a flutter in my chest, a blend of eagerness and nostalgia. Pulling into the dirt parking lot, I noticed the place looked the same and yet different. A fresh coat of paint on the walls, new curtains in the windows, but still emanating that soft, welcoming light. The second I opened the door, the warmth washed over me. Lucy was wiping a table and glanced up, her eyes widening in joyful surprise. You came back, she rushed over, throwing her arms around me, and in that instant I felt like I'd never left. Meredith appeared behind the counter, beaming as she saw me. Thomas stepped out from the kitchen, a ladle in hand, and just like before, I felt safe. But more than that, I felt what I could only describe as home, and it brought tears to my eyes. How have you been? Lucy asked, and for the first time in a long time, my answer was a genuine smile. I realized I had a story of renewal to share, one that carried the echoes of my original heartbreak, but was now infused with hope. And so I sat at the same counter, in the same chair, and told them everything. How much better my father was doing, how I found a career I cared about, and how I felt like a different person thanks to all the kindness they'd given me. We talked for hours, pausing only so Meredith could bring out plates of fresh apple pie. Each bite tasted of nostalgia, and the present moment rolled into one. At some point, Lucy squeezed my hand. We silently acknowledged that this place was always going to be a part of who I was. Through the laughter, the memories, and the sweet tang of pie, I understood that second chances don't just happen once. They happen every time we open our hearts to compassion, whether we're on the giving end or the receiving one. When I finally continued on my journey, the weight of uncertainty was gone. The cafe behind me was still bustling with life, still a refuge where people from all walks of life could come to find sustenance and a chance to rebuild. But as I drove off, I carried the glow of that cafe in my chest, a guiding light in any darkness that might lie ahead. And like the countless travelers before me, I was no longer a stranger on the road. I was part of a story bigger than myself, a testament to the quiet, profound transformations that happen when even a single ember of hope is fanned into flame.